Hello everyone, my name is Luca, probably better known as LegenVD here on YouTube, and I've been given the opportunity to showcase a few cards from the recent Explorer Anthology bundle. Wizards provided me with the gems for this, and you can see all the new cards that are included. You'll get 4 copies of each card, and these are not only useful in Explorer, but also formats like Historic and Historic Brawl. So let's purchase these. And I've prepared a few deck lists using the cards that we just unlocked, so let's dive right into it. Our first deck is Boros Heroic, a red-white creature aggro deck playing lots of cheap creatures alongside pump spells, and our creatures include Favored Hoplite, a 1/2, saying whenever we cast a spell that targets it, put a +1/+1 counter on the Hoplite and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. We also have the full set of Soulscar Mage, a 1/2 with prowess, so it also benefits from casting lots of cheap instants and sorceries, and it also can potentially turn our burn spells into -1/-1 counters on opposing creatures, which can be a useful way of dealing with large green creatures, for instance, that we otherwise cannot outright kill. At 2 mana we've got a full set of Virtuoso, 1/1 with a double strike, and whenever we target it, it lets us connive, so it can pick up additional +1 counters and let us loot through the deck. We also have the full set of Arcanist to provide a ton of card advantage by replaying spells out of the graveyard when it attacks, and 2 copies of Legionnaire, a 2/2 with haste, and when we target it, it picks up a +1 counter and lets us scry 1. So the goal is going to be to play 1 or 2 of our cheap creatures and then start targeting them with our various pump spells, and those include Defiant Strike and Ancestral Anger to both draw a card and pump our creature's power. We've got the full set of Homestead Courage, which can also be flashed back out of the graveyard to put a +1 counter on our creature and give it Vigilance until end of turn. And another new addition from Explorer Anthology is Titan Strength, giving +3/+1 and letting us scry 1, so that can be a nice way to find more action spells. And those also include 4 copies of Reckless Rage, which is a nice removal spell dealing 4 damage to an opposing creature, but we do need to deal 2 damage to our own creature as well in order to cast it, but that's not a problem given all our creatures that we want to play anyways, and 2 damage usually doesn't kill our own creature outside of maybe Virtuoso. Hoplite will even pick up a +1 counter as we're targeting it, and Soulscar Mage pumps up to 3 toughness thanks to prowess, even the Legionnaire picks up a counter, so Reckless Rage is just pure upside in this deck. And then we also have 2 copies of Play with Fire as just a cheap burn spell, can also maybe finish off an opponent, can also replay it with our Arcanist, so just a good card in general. And finally 4 copies of God's Willing, giving target creature we control protection from the color of our choice until end of turn, so that can save our creature from removal spells, can also potentially get past opposing blockers if the opponent only has creatures from one specific color. If we name that color, our opponent won't be able to block our attacking creature, which can be a great way to close out the game. And then we've got a very low land count, including plenty of red-white dual lands and Igancho for value, and then we also get to kind of free roll Gigantha as our companion, as we don't have any double colored cards in our deck. Next up we've got Mono Blue Spirits, a spirit tribal deck playing lots of counter spells and instant speed plays, and then we also have the full set of Mausoleum Wanderer as a new addition, a 1/1 spirit with flying, saying whenever another spirit enters the battlefield under our control, the Wanderer gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and we can also sacrifice it at any point to counter target instant or sorcery spell unless his controller pays X, where X is the Wanderer's power, so it gives us a nice 1 mana play that can also potentially protect our team from removal or sweeper effects. Then we've got the full set of Ascendant Spirit alongside all our snow lands, so we can start leveling it up. First a 2/3, then a 4/4 flyer, eventually put +1 counters on it, and that's also great in a deck playing a bunch of counter spells, because we can easily pass a turn, and then the opponent doesn't know if we're planning to level up Ascendant Spirit. If the opponent doesn't play into our various instant speed counters, we can still activate our Spirit in the opponent's end step, or potentially threaten to block and upgrade our Spirit. And then we also have the full set of Spectral Sailor, 1/1 spirit with flash and flying, and in the late game can also draw extra cards. At 2 mana we can maybe flash in a Rattle Chains, which can give one of our creatures hexproof until end of turn, so we can protect it from removal, and then we can also play our other spirits at instant speed with flash, so that includes some cards like Supreme Phantom, which will give other spirits we control +1/+1, a great anthem effect to help us close out the game, as well as Shacklegeist, a 2/2 flyer, giving us some form of removal, because we can tap 2 untapped spirits we control to tap target creature we don't control, so we can keep some large creatures in check. And then our non-creature spells include 4 copies of Curious Obsession, which is a great card draw engine in a deck filled with cheap flying creatures, giving them +1/+1, and whenever our enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card, and we can easily protect our enchanted creature, now not only with the Mausoleum Wanderer, but we can also flash in a Rattle Chains for hexproof, or maybe use Slip out the back, putting a +1 counter on target creature and phasing it out, so it will still keep the enchantment once it comes back, so we can draw more cards with it. Got a bit of cheap interaction with 2 copies of Fading Hope, and then we can potentially counter some scary spells on the way back with Spell Pierce, 2 copies of Lofty Denial, which will often require the opponent to pay 4 mana, and Geist Light Snare we can potentially cast for just a single blue if we control both a spirit and an enchantment, and then the opponent will have to pay 3 mana to resolve their spell. And our mana base also includes 3 copies of Faceless Haven as an extra creature that can also count as a spirit, so it can potentially pick up the bonus from Supreme Phantom, and then a Soaring City as an extra bounce spell. Next up is Rockdose Midrange, a red-black midrange deck playing lots of cheap interaction to disrupt the opponent's game plan and then eventually take over with its efficient threats, and those now also include 2 copies of Kalitas, Traitor of Ghet, a 3/4 legendary vampire warrior with a lifelink, so it shines against aggressive decks, saying if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Can also sacrifice vampires or zombies to put additional counters onto Kalitas, which will scale nicely with lifelink, and our deck's got plenty of removal to potentially make use of Kalitas' ability. And then at 1 mana we've got the full set of Thoughtseize, the premier discard spell in the format. We've got 4 copies of Fatal Push and a copy of Bloodchief's Thirst and Strangle to complement it. Then at 2 mana we can maybe first use the Stomp Adventure, dealing 2 damage to any target, and then later cast a creature half. We've got Blood Tithe Harvester as a nice 3/2 to apply pressure with, but can also be used as removal, and the Blood token can help improve our hand. We've got Kroxa to make the opponent discard, and can be escaped out of our graveyard as a powerful 6/6 Elder Giant, and then Heartless Act, an additional spot removal spell. At 3 mana we've got a one-off Kolaghan's Command, can maybe help take out artifacts like Parhelion at instant speed, make the opponent discard, deal 2 damage to any target, or maybe get back a creature from our graveyard to our hand. And then a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker can provide a ton of value as well, with the Shaman token making treasures, and then later with the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, potentially copying some of our creatures. One of the best combos is alongside Blood Tithe Harvester, as we can copy it, make an extra blood token, and potentially take out an opposing creature in the process. And then a Graveyard Trespasser offers a bit more graveyard hate when it enters or attacks, and has built-in protection with Ward, forcing the opponent to discard a card. And at 4 mana besides Kalitas, we've got Sorin and Chandra as planeswalkers that can provide additional card advantage and offer plenty of other utility between making mana, dealing damage, or making flying a life-linking vampire tokens. And then our mana base has a few goodies as well, with Castle providing extra cards, and some creature lands like Hive and Den, and some of the channel lands from Kamigawa, Abandoned Mire, and Crucible of Defiance. Next up we've got Azorious or Blue-White Control, which is a deck that wants to drag out the game and then eventually take over with its many card draw effects and powerful planeswalkers, and a great new addition from the Explorer Anthology bundle is Supreme Verdict as a 4 mana uncounterable sweeper that doesn't really have any drawbacks. Then as a control deck we of course have a few counter spells, including Censor, which can be cycled as well if we don't need it, Dovin's Veto to counter non-creature spells, and at 3 mana Absorb also gains a bit of life, which is quite valuable for a control deck that just wants to stay alive as long as possible. We've got a few spot removal spells, including Portable Hole at 1 mana, as well as March, which can be cast for 1 mana in a pinch, and then 2 copies of Fateful Absence as more spot removal that will give the opponent a clue token in return, but the efficiency and the instant speed nature is still worth it. Then we've got some card draw with Behold the Multiverse, which we can potentially exile for 2 mana thanks to Foretell, and then cast it on the cheap, as well as 2 copies of Memory Deluge, which can also be flashed back out of the graveyard to completely take over the game. And then we've got our powerful Planeswalkers with the Wandering Emperor, which we can use as removal, can gain a bit of life in the process, and make some Samurai tokens to maybe close out the game. And Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, a powerhouse from Standards past, can draw extra cards, potentially get rid of opposing non-land permanents, and by untapping 2 lands we can easily still keep up our various instants in the opponent's turn. And then we've got additional finishers in the form of Shark Typhoon, can be cycled or cast for 6 mana if we're feeling brave to make a whole host of Shark tokens with flying, as well as a Farewell as an additional sweeper, which can also hit artifacts, enchantments, and graveyards, which can be quite useful as well. And then our mana base includes a few goodies like Castle Ardenvale to make 1/1 tokens, which can be its own win condition. We've got Castle Ventress to scry instead, and then the Channel lands from Kamigawa, Aigancho can be used as removal, and Soaring City as a bounce spell, and we also have a Hall of the Storm Giants as a creature land, as well as 3 copies of Field of Ruin, mainly to deal with opposing creature lands. And then since we're not playing any creatures in our main deck, we get to free roll Kahira as our companion, although we could also go up to 80 cards and play Yorion as companion instead. Now, the decks we've covered so far have mostly been established decks that you can expect to do well. This last one is a bit of a brew, and it's Elf Tribal featuring the 4 copies of Elvish Mystic to join Lenor Elves to give us a ton of early ramp. We still have Jaspera Sentinel as well to make more mana, and then our payoff cards include Elvish Clankcaller to pump our team, can search up additional copies with it as well, Elvish Warmaster to make a whole bunch of 1/1 tokens and eventually give our team +2/+2 and Death Touch. Duina's Elite can also make an extra elf token when it enters, Visionary gets to draw, and then at 3 mana we've got 2 copies of Marwyn the Nurture, as well as 4 copies of Circle of Dreams Druid, and these can make a ton of mana if we get a nice start. And with all that mana we can of course pump our Warmaster, search up additional Clankcallers, or maybe even go off with our Realmwalker, which is our final 3 mana creature, letting us play elves off the top of our deck, which can very quickly get out of hand, especially in a deck with a low land count and a high creature count. And then our non-creature spells include Collected Company to hopefully hit some powerful elves at instant speed, as well as 2 copies of a Growing Rite, which can easily transform in this deck as we're making so many cheap creatures and tokens, and then once it transforms it's essentially a Gaia's Cradle, which is also historically very powerful in an elves deck. And then the rest of our mana base includes Boseiju, 4 copies of Castle Garenbrig, which can often help us cast multiple creatures in the same turn, or maybe activate one of our elves' abilities, and then just 13 basic forests. So this should be a fun one, even though it may not be the most competitive deck out there, but Elvish Mystic will easily find a home in plenty of decks, including in older formats like Historic. Make sure to check out my YouTube channel if you want to see more Explorer content, and I'll be sure to upload some crazy brews featuring some of the new cards as well. But for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.